broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Sage, and I'm the Executive Director of the Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance, known as the AREA. And a warm welcome to our latest webinar, How You Can Benefit from Enterprise Augmented Reality, Insights from Industry Leaders in PTC and Newport News Shipbuilding. The AREA has delivered a number of webinars that can be found on the new AREA website. Please go to www.thearea.org and navigate to the AREA resources page and the AREA videos and webinars page within that. There's lots of different information on the AREA website, so please feel free to have a look around and find as much information and content about enterprise AR there. So let's get on with our webinar today. I'm excited to be joined by two of the world's leading experts and practitioners in enterprise augmented reality, who are both AREA members. Michael and Beth can draw on a lot of experience in delivering AR solutions that have provided real business benefit and also have many insights into overcoming the business and technical challenges in implementing AR solutions. I hope you're looking forward to listening to them as much as I am. But before we start, I'd like to give a quick introduction about the AREA and the work that we are doing. The AREA is the only global membership-funded non-profit alliance dedicated to helping accelerate the adoption of enterprise augmented reality by supporting the growth of a comprehensive ecosystem. The alliance was formed after a number of innovative companies started speaking regularly and found that they wanted and had started to invest in enterprise AR. But by working together, they'd created a better understanding of what enterprise AR tools are available, what you can do, what problems you can solve, and how to implement AR. And then, as we are still now working very much on understanding the return on investment from AR solutions. The AREA has kind of led to opportunities to co-innovate, to build partnerships and business opportunities with all of us have the goal of the long-term adoption of AR technology. Today, the AREA offers a deep and open exchange of good practice, lessons learned, and technology insights that help all of the members and the wider ecosystem. And ultimately, we're helping enterprises effectively implement AR and helping AR providers engage with enterprises across the world. The AREA membership comprises of enterprises. We have organizations and companies like Boeing, Bosch, Lockheed Martin. You'll be listening to Beth from Newport News Shipbuilding today, Huawei, Medtronic, to name a few. We have a number of AR providers, hardware, software, platform, gesture control, consultancy, content organizations, and I'm really pleased and excited to have Michael from PTC with us today. And then we also work with non-commercial organizations, government agencies, university research institutes, who are often at the leading edge thinking of AR technology. Finally, I'd like to give a quick overview of the initiatives that the AREA is working on to help the enterprise AR ecosystem. We deliver thought leadership enterprise AR content that helps business decision makers make informed decisions to invest in AR. Content such as use cases, e.g. what problems can be solved, case studies, examples of real life use cases being solved and providing real value, what technologies are needed, and the return on investment, the ROI, from using AR to solve those problems. The AREA offers networking opportunities through both virtual meetings and face-to-face events. It's a great way to engage with the members and the wider ecosystem, to build knowledge and shared understanding, partnerships, to co-innovate, and to discuss what needs to be done to drive the enterprise AR ecosystem forward. We also understand that there is an industry skills gap, so we're looking at ways to work with universities and educational organizations to define AR courses to make sure that we all have the skills and the knowledge needed for the future. And the area now has a strong focus on reducing the barriers to AR adoption. To support this, we've created a number of committees in working groups to focus on identifying, classifying, prioritizing, and overcoming these business and technical barriers. This includes committees around safety and security and looking at the issues there. We have also created a single set of hardware and software requirements that we share with the ecosystem and continue to market the benefits of AR to the wider industry. The area research capability enables members to create research proposals that are then voted on. We have already delivered 2 member-exclusive comprehensive research reports, the first focusing on security in wearables, which provides an overview of the risks and how to manage AR wearables from a security perspective, and the research has been very well received by the members. The second research project delivered in H2 2017 was the first enterprise AR ROI calculator and supporting reports. Again, this was needed to help quantify, qualify, and understand the costs and benefit of enterprise AR. We're just about to release to the members the third research project, which is a framework to help assessing safety and human factors in enterprise use cases. This output will promote a consistent approach to safety and human factors for AR solutions, again, helping to reduce the barriers to adoption. Okay, I hope you've learned a little bit more about the area. If you're interested in finding out even more and how membership may benefit your organization, please feel free to contact me on mark@thearea.org. So 2 final messages before I introduce today's experts and panelists. We will not be taking verbal questions at the end of the session, but very happy and would encourage you to write your questions in the questions part of the webinar system. And if we have time, we'll answer them verbally, but if not, we promise that we will respond to you and to the attendees with answers to those questions. And the second message is that we are recording this call, and I'll share the link to it when completed, so you can go back and revisit any of it. Okay, so on we go. I'd like to ask Michael and Beth to introduce themselves and provide a little bit of insight to you and to your company. Michael, perhaps you'd like to go first.
Great, thanks so much, Mark, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mike Campbell, and I look after the augmented reality product strategy at PTC. I've been at PTC for a long time, working on various elements of digital transformation for industrial companies. And my past roles have included leadership roles in our CAD business, our 3D solid modeling business, as well as our ThingWorks, which is our industrial innovation platform, industrial IoT platform. I'm a graduate of Boston University with a background in mechanical engineering, but I've spent the last couple of decades working in the software space, and again, largely at PTC. Let's go to the next slide, Mark. For those of you that aren't familiar with PTC, it is about a $1.25 billion global software company based here in the Boston, Massachusetts area. We have technology to help with everything related to the creation, operation, manufacturing, and servicing of products. We have a pretty intense focus on industrial innovation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as capabilities to support creation of digital twins. There's about 28,000 active customers, and again, you'll find those in sort of heavy equipment, aerospace and defense, automotive, very industrial, discrete manufacturing bias, as well as some retail consumer goods customers as well. Next slide, Mark. If you look at that PTC logo, it's really intended to represent sort of our mission, and our mission is really helping you get value out of the convergence of the physical and digital worlds. If you look closely, you'll see a P at the top and a D at the bottom. And if we build this slide out, that's really how we think about our business. Again, in the digital world, for sort of product lifecycle management in its broadest definition, PTC provides capabilities for CAD and PLM with our Windchill offering, application or software lifecycle management, as well as service lifecycle management, and that's a pretty big part of PTC. That's about a little bit more than $1 billion business. But at the top, we represent our technologies that are related to more so the physical world. Benefiting from tools like IoT and analytics, AR and VR, and industrial connectivity. And if you advance one more, you'll also notice that this logo looks a little bit like the Asian yin-yang symbol for two equal but opposite forces that define each other and keep them in balance. And that's how we think about the physical and digital world. And then if you advance one more, Mark, that's also how we think sort of about this symbiotic relationship between IoT and AR. IoT is about instrumenting the physical world with sensors and leveraging ubiquitous connectivity to capture data digitally and then drive insights from it and orchestrate activities because of it. And AR is about taking that rich digital information, sometimes informing a digital twin, and then presenting that back in the context of the physical world by overlaying that digital information. So we'll talk a little bit more about how PTC sees the world, but that's who I am and a little bit about the company.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And again, it's my honor to introduce Beth, Beth Scicchitano, who, as well as she'll explain a little bit her work in Newport News Shipbuilding, but is also an area board member, and I'm very lucky to have her on the board. So, Beth, over to you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for having me and inviting me to be part of this webinar today. So, next slide. So, just a little bit about Newport News Shipbuilding. We are located in Newport News, Virginia. Our company is the sole designer, builder, and refueler of U.S. Navy nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and one of only 2 shipyards in the U.S. capable of designing and building nuclear-powered submarines. To add to that, midway through the aircraft carrier's 50-year life cycle, it arrives back here at our shipyard for significant update, and that includes refueling the reactors and significant repairs, upgrades, and modernization work. And that effort takes approximately 4 years to complete. We also provide fleet maintenance services to the U.S. Navy, both here at Newport News and at Navy bases around the world. And to get all that done, we have about 20,000 employees, and we are the largest industrial employer in Virginia. So here in Newport News, we have a broad range of facilities to support all that work that ranges from our on-site clinic to a fire department. So we have a lot of people with a broad area of background. And then just a little bit about me. So I've been working here at Newport News Shipbuilding for a little over 15 years. I share mechanical engineering background with Mike. Graduated from Penn State University with a mechanical engineering degree, and then went on and got my master's in business administration from Strayer University. So I like tying the technical and the business sides together. But today, I lead a team of about 30 people who specialize in creating and applying augmented reality applications for not only our shipbuilders, but also to the Navy. So the team we have designers, engineers, technical artists, user experience. We also have a human factors expert on our team, and software developers. So we have a very diverse team who come together to create what I consider to be world-class augmented reality for our shipbuilders. Next slide. So I joined the team back in 2014, but our team in general started looking at this back in 2011. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beth. Okay, so on the webinar today, we have a number of hopefully tough questions for Mike and Beth that I'm going to ask and give them an opportunity to talk about their experience and some of the challenges, and just to give people an overview of what's happening in the ecosystem. So I'd like to crash straight into that if I can, Mike, and ask you this first question about, we've all heard the hype and around AR and the kind of apps and things like that, but from an enterprise perspective, let's get down to what are the fundamental problems AR solves.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. And, PTC has thought quite a bit about this. In fact, our CEO, Jim Heppelman, and Professor Michael Porter at the Harvard Business School have written an article that was in the November HBR magazine, Harvard Business Review magazine, and I'll show you a couple of the images from that magazine. Why don't we go ahead to the next slide. The fundamental challenge that we all have relates to the deluge of data, right? I mean, the typical person is constantly bombarded with more and more information, and that's due to sort of the explosion of content online and within enterprise business systems, and as I said, the ubiquity of sensors and connectivity on devices that are all streaming this information. And in order to consume that information, I mean, we basically have 5 mechanisms. On the next slide, Mark, I overview those, and we all know what they are. We have our 5 senses, but the reality is that it's really vision. It's really our ability to see that accounts for somewhere north of 85% of our ability to understand the world around us. And today, we understand the world around us largely, as is shown here, in terms of digital data. We understand that data on 2D screens, whether that is your smartwatch or your smartphone or the laptop that you're probably most likely sitting in front of right now. That is really the medium with which we have to communicate. And next slide. When it comes to mapping that information to the physical world around us, and in particular related to the topic today, and really PTC's focus, the industrial physical world, we have to map information from that 2D flat screen to the physical world around us. And you've all experienced this challenge. If you've gone someplace that you were unfamiliar with, you're using a GPS, and you're trying to participate in a conference call, or maybe you're trying to listen to a book on tape, you will find yourself distracted from those activities as you look at the GPS and look at the physical world around you. And really what's happening there is a cognitive load that is placed on you. Frankly, you are placing it on yourself by trying to do this, by trying to map that digital information onto the physical world or into the physical world around you. And on the next slide, we see sort of the reality of what impact augmented reality can have there, right? By overlaying digital information directly on your field of view. In this case, we have an example from Continental of a heads-up display in an automobile showing you speed and direction, and there's no ambiguity. It's very, very clear where I should be going when I'm driving this automobile. I don't need to do that mapping; it's done for me. So really the fundamental problem that we're addressing here is reduction of cognitive load. And by doing so, we're able to achieve all kinds of benefits, like increased efficiency, increased safety, increased accuracy. Those are all of the things that we are able to bring to the industrial enterprise space by taking advantage of augmented reality.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And I certainly feel like I suffer from cognitive overload all the time. So, tools to help me and help my business is definitely something I'm very excited about. Okay, so moving on from that, let's talk about what kind of industries and functions within different industries can benefit from these new capabilities. Can you talk a little bit about that, please, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely, and I've put a couple of slides in here. The first one shows some research that we've done looking at sort of the value chain of either product or discrete product or discrete process manufacturing and product development. And what we have discovered is that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity to apply augmented reality across that entire value chain. The percentages that you see here reflect feedback from PTC customers that are engaged with us in AR, and in fact, PTC is engaged with over 10,000 industrial companies that are experimenting with and trying out our software and providing us this kind of feedback. So the reality is that it's quite broadly applicable, and that's sort of a further proof point to the transformative nature of augmented reality in the industrial enterprise space. We've identified about 75 different use cases that apply across all kinds of industries, whether you're in the automotive industry or the electronics and high tech or heavy equipment. If you're in the, let's say, the broadly defined manufacturing domain, the industrial space, there is tremendous opportunity for AR. Now, if we go to the next slide, what we have done is we have mapped those use cases to really to sort of, let's say, technology readiness. So, in order for a use case to deliver value, it has to be meaningful and impactful and, either save lives or save time or increase accuracy and fix rate and so forth. But it also has to be achievable. And, as I think everybody would recognize, we are in the early days of augmented reality. There is fantastic technology available today, but it's not like the web. It's not like, other types of compute that have been around for decades yet. So when we look at these use cases through that lens, we've identified a couple of really high value use cases. And, they fall into the category of service, where companies are beginning to augment procedural guidance, where they're being able to provide remote expert guidance through a you see what I see kind of technology that we can use and then annotate our view of the world. We're seeing tremendous value being delivered in manufacturing, whether that is for the purposes the daily machine setup and changeover, or again augmented procedural guidance, work instructions, inspection instructions. And then finally, we're seeing a lot of value, a lot of interest being delivered in sales and marketing, where companies want to be able to take maybe very heavy, very complicated assets to a customer for a visit or to a trade show. They would like to have multiple configurations. They would like to be able to demonstrate how the product works. And there's a lot of logistical complexity in doing that if you make heavy equipment, big machines. So using augmented reality to visualize those products, visualize something that's not there, is driving a tremendous amount of value. So those are a couple of the use cases that we're seeing featured pretty prominently across all industries, Mark.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. And I kind of just add a few comments to that. And certainly I've been lucky in my role being able to speak to lots of organizations in the AR ecosystem. And what's been very apparent over the last probably 6 months is at different conferences and events, companies are talking about real bottom line savings now. We're getting to the stage where they're actually mentioning percentage savings, either on saving on time or reduction of errors. And, the report that Jim and the Harvard Business Review show some real great examples of that. So, I would recommend people to take a look at that and see some companies making some real savings. And I just wanted to reiterate on your point that I get asked a lot, which industries are farthest forward in the industry or using AR. And actually my response is it's not so much to do with industry, it's to do with the use cases, and they can be it's the same use case across lots of industries. So if anybody is listening and thinking, well, actually AR is not for me, you'll be surprised. And taking on Mike's point on the service manufacturing sell and market, there are great opportunities to improve performance and reduce errors and become more efficient. So, thank you for that insight into the industry.
My pleasure.
I think kind of adding on to that, Mike, there's lots of digital transformation initiatives going on. We hear of all these other words, IoT, not often words, they're often 3-letter acronyms, but IoT and AI and, PLM and everything like that. Can you perhaps talk a little bit about how AR fits into those digital transformation initiatives and what companies are doing?
Yeah, I will, and I'd like to use a graphic that we tend to use a lot at PTC. This really represents the idea of industrial innovation. It's representative of what many companies want to do when they think about, let's say, digital transformation broadly. And basically, if we read left to right, I mean, the process that companies are going through, the journey is first off to be able to source data. So either source data from sensors on machines or source data from clouds like the Microsoft Azure cloud, or source data from factory lines where you've got PLCs that are streaming off tons of information, or get it from other enterprise systems, maybe your CRM or ERP system, or your engineering systems, your CAD, your PLM. But sourcing that data is only half of the battle. You've got to be able to contextualize that data. You've got to be able to structure that data in a way that is representative of whatever product or process it is that you're trying to gain insights into. So we often talk about this idea of contextualizing as sort of defining the structure for your digital twin that is informed by this data that is sourced from all of these places. But this is really where you kind of define that digital twin and you manage its configurations, etc. So now that you've got this data and you've contextualized it, then you want to gain insights, and you do that by synthesizing the data. You do that by performing analytics or computational model-based simulations so that you can exercise this digital twin, so that you can understand what happened and why it happened and what might happen in the future, all with the goal of gaining insight so that you can what? So that you can do something. And we think about doing something in two different ways. One way is by orchestrating either a physical system, close a valve or slow down a line, or orchestrating a set of digital systems. I want to kick off a work order in my field service management system because an alert has come in. So that's one way that we drive action. But the last way that we drive action is by engaging people. And a lot of times we engage people with dashboards or mobile apps where we present information, as I said, on a 2D screen, but more and more companies want to engage people using the power of augmented reality. And there's two different ways to sort of look at this image. I mean, one is that you've got this platform or this process for digital transformation, and at the end of it, you can present that information using AR. The other way to look at it is if you have an AR-centric perspective, this is a presentation of a content pipeline. Many people think about AR, and one of the big challenges is content. With what shall I augment my reality? And this provides a rich set of information that is meaningful in the industrial space that can help you improve service, improve your operations, frankly, improve your engineering and product quality by taking advantage of this information and then closing the loop back to those organizations. So, as I showed in the initial introductory slides, we think that the ideas of augmented reality and IoT are quite symbiotic, and hopefully that comes through in sort of this graphic as well as it relates to digital transformation.
Great, thanks, Mike. And again, just if I can add a little bit of some comments onto that, I think you talk very eloquently about the source of content, and that's something we see as still a challenge, but it's getting better, is getting content out of enterprise systems. The asset of that content is so important. So, we have companies that are actually doing that are area members, and I think it's something, again, to consider, what content do you have and how can you bring it out into an environment that can then be augmented. And going to the other end, and again, just to talk about the types of devices. A lot of people tend to think augmented reality is a wearable thing. It's all about AR devices. And actually, and Beth may touch on some of this from her experience. There are other ways, there are other devices like the mobiles and tablets and projection and other things that you can actually use to augment technology. So hopefully another takeaway from this webinar is to think of that wider experience, and content is really important, but the delivery of that content is really important as well. And what we found, or what I found being able to speak to people, because the content is delivered in a contextual and relevant way, people really enjoy using it. It's not a case of having to go and find, be it diagrams or PDFs or whatever. They have the information that allows them to do their work straight away in a simple to use contextual way. And I think we're seeing certainly satisfaction of workers increasing as well. Fantastic. Okay, let's carry on. So Mike, the last question for you is perhaps talk a little bit about any companies thinking of deploying AR. What should they be thinking about? What questions should they be asking?
Yeah, this is a great question, and we've thought a lot about this. There's some content again in that Harvard Business Review article, but I have a nice graphic that will help frame up those questions. And essentially, there are 5. And maybe we'll start where you just finished off, Mark, on the AR hardware point, right? And basically this spider diagram in the center, and the center is the easiest approach, and as you go out, the approach becomes more sophisticated, maybe more complicated, maybe more powerful as well, more valuable. So when we think about AR hardware, I mean, there are a variety of different approaches. Everybody has an AR device in their pocket in the form of a phone, an Android or iOS phone usually, tablets, projectors, heads-up displays like the work that Continental is doing, and then ultimately head-mounted displays. I'll emphasize your point that it doesn't have to be head-mounted. We have lots of customers already that are using tablets, maybe for a manufacturing line. They're mounting them on a swing-out arm, sliding them into the field of view when they need the information, sliding them out of the field of view. So variety of approaches there, but you should think about that. There's a spectrum of AR capabilities, and the simplest is simply visualizing something that's not there. And I know that a lot of the work that Beth and her team are doing that they're finding to be very, very valuable is simply visualizing things that aren't there to the naked eye. More sophisticated, more requiring more investment would be instruction and guidance, so augmented procedures. And then the most sophisticated are interaction, right? I want to fundamentally change the human-machine interface. Instead of touching a screen or touching hardware buttons, I want to use AR to control feeds or speeds, whatever the case may be. In the lower right, we have content source. Where is the content going to come from? Is it something that I'm going to simply build for the special purpose of having it in AR? Am I going to repurpose existing data? Maybe I've got CAD data or other rich engineering 3D data that I want to, or any 3D data that I want to use in AR. Or do I need to present information that is real time? Do I need to present temperature, voltage, current, some sort of analytics results that are being updated regularly? So again, there's a sophistication spectrum there. How are you going to implement your AR solution? Are you going to buy something off the shelf that works out of the box? Are you going to embrace a platform and spool up development team to go and build these, or are you going to engage in maybe sort of external software development? Again, the most sophisticated approach. And then finally, what kind of mapping or tracking are you going to use? Unregistered is the idea of simply gauges or dials or values floating in space within your field of view, maybe on a Google Glass like device or a Vuzix or RealWear like device. Is it okay to simply put things using spatial tracking on a flat ground plane? Or can you take advantage of an image or a marker? Or does it actually need to be mapped to the 3D geometry? And these are all questions that you need to answer with an eye toward the use case. So Mark, if you just build the slide out, what we've done is we've taken those use cases that I mentioned, and we've sort of shown kind of generally what type of an approach, what's the answer to these 5 questions that is going to allow you to do, for example, product visualization and demonstration. So, these answers are different for everybody, but as you think about your AR journey, these are questions that you may want to have in mind.
Thanks, Mike, and this is great. I've been lucky enough to see the spider diagram a few times, and every time I look at it, it really helps to understand, based on those use cases, the different types of options, and building out your support and delivery of it. So thank you for that. I think it's a very useful tool, and I guess we're seeing these begin to change as the technology moves forward, and use cases are beginning to adapt and develop. So it's a ever-changing mapping exercise. Cool. Okay. So Mike, thanks for those insights. Just remind the audience that if you have got any questions for Mike or Beth, and we're going to be asking Beth some tough questions now, please type them into the box, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about and answer them later on. Or if not, we will respond to you directly. Okay. Now, as I said, I'm lucky enough to have Beth on this call, who we've been able to work together for a long time now, and I know it's a huge amount of experience. So I'm going to start off with a relatively simple question, Beth, about why Newport News Shipbuilding was initially interested in AR.
Yes, so Newport News Shipbuilding initially started looking at going digital in 2011, really as a way to decrease the cost of construction for building our ships. We started with digital storyboarding, or we also call them visual work instructions, and we saw encouraging time savings through a prototype during that time period. Digital storyboarding or visual work instruction is essentially providing work instructions through either essentially a 3D model, maybe on a tablet, instead of a paper drawing that has 2D views. And you combine that with the necessary information to get the job done. Currently, we'll give a work instruction. It will reference a drawing, a paper two-dimensional drawing, and then you also have to pull a procedure to really pull all that information to get the job done. So we decided to really undergo an effort to concisely give all the information to a person to get their job done. So we knew we had to consider a significant technology advancement, and at that time, that's what we considered visual work instructions to be, a game changer for us. So how do you prove that out? We did a pilot in 2013 that proved for a particular craftsman on a particular job a savings of 35%, and that was using a digital work instruction. So that really equates to 2.5 hours a day for that person, which is huge for us. So then that really evolved into our integrated digital shipbuilding effort here at Newport News Shipbuilding that's underway today, because we have a goal of being drawingless by the time we start constructing CVN 80. And just to give a little bit of context on that, we recently delivered CVN 78, which is the Gerald R. Ford, in May of 2017, and that's the start of the Ford class of aircraft carriers. Today, we're currently building CVN 79, which is the John F. Kennedy, and then CVN 80, the next one, will be called the Enterprise. So that's just a little bit of context on the Ford class carriers there. So at the same time, augmented reality really provides a spatial relationship through the digital overlay that the visual work instructions don't. And we realized really early on that there's value with both. So while NNS is now creating those visual work instructions pretty much en masse, our team decided to focus very early on augmented reality because we saw the value from that additional spatial relationship. In 2014, we saw a 95% savings in one particular inspection because of both the value of giving a particular person the information they needed to do their job in addition to providing that spatial relevance. So that person was able to walk into a space or a room, we call them compartments on ships, and very easily and quickly be able to conduct his inspection. And just a little bit of context to that as well, when you're on a ship undergoing construction, I can tell you from personal experience, it can be very difficult to orient oneself using just drawings. So that's a little bit about why we were initially interested in augmented reality and why we're still continuing to pursue it today.
Okay, thanks, Beth. And just to add my understanding on the context as well, can you explain a little bit how long it takes to actually build one of your aircraft carriers? Because I kind of know, but I think it's worth the audience getting an understanding and the kind of savings that you get when you talk about these percentages, you know, run into a substantial amount of time.
So we're currently building them on 7-year cycles today. We could potentially build them faster, but that's really essentially based on how the funding is given out by the Navy.
Fantastic. So the savings you're making are kind of measured in hours and days, I guess.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay, great. So to add on to that, then, you know, you've done some initial pilots. They've been going for a while. Can you talk about where else you've been using AR and other business values? Perhaps talking a little bit about some of the use cases and devices you've been using as well.
Yeah, so today we are deploying on tablets because we are very much in an industrial environment. We have a lot of safety concerns that we really need to study and understand before we start deploying on heads-up displays. So today we're deploying on tablets. Most of the use cases that we've proven value surround the visualizations in the physical space that support either the construction work process or the inspections, as well as step-by-step instructions. And those step-by-step instructions can be done to either support training or maintenance in the field. So we see that there's a lot of value in seeing what equipment will be installed where prior to it being there. And then for inspections, it allows that inspector to very, very quickly identify where items should be located without having to look at drawings. So that reduces the time because they're spending their time on the actual inspection and the inspection points rather than trying to find the information or orient themselves. Then for the step-by-step instructions, whether that's for training or for performing maintenance, it reduces the time spent looking for information, and there might be some nuances that are really more easily shown through AR than by reading a tech manual or looking at diagrams in a tech manual. So through AR, you can show animations overlaid on the equipment or videos that make the learning process faster. And again, getting back to that spatial relevance, we feel that that's a very important distinguishing factor. So you can speed up the learning process, and we're also now looking at how it can help the knowledge retention in the future.
Great, thank you, Beth. Okay, well let's move on to the next question, because I think this is a rather interesting one, and it'd be great to get your thoughts and insight into this. You know, you come from a huge organization. It takes a long time to build some, you know, amazing aircraft carriers and other things. So do you think businesses have unrealistic expectations about AR because of all the hype, you know, when we're talking about Pokemon Go and other kind of bits and things like that? You know, what's your thoughts on the expectations of businesses?
I haven't really necessarily seen that businesses have unrealistic expectations. I think the hype on the consumer side really makes it easier for people within the business to potentially understand how AR could benefit them, whereas before it may have been unclear. So a lot more people today know and understand what augmented reality is, where in the past, I and others have had to spend a lot of time educating people on AR, really explaining what it is. Now, if a business doesn't have a standard process, if they don't have standard processes or procedures established, then maybe just using AR isn't necessarily going to help them with their processes, because AR won't solve or fix a bad process. You have to start with your process. We have seen instances where there isn't necessarily a standard process, so you kind of have to take a step back there and do a lot of upfront work to standardize your process, because what you don't want to do is roll out what you think is a procedure based on one user's input and then have the other 10 reject it because that's not how they work. So maybe doing some upfront work to standardize that might be necessary if you don't have that already. Additionally, AR isn't applicable in all cases. There are many times where virtual reality or even a visual work instruction given on a tablet, something simple, is just as valuable. So you have to know when to use it or when to use something else.
Great, thanks, Beth. And can I again perhaps ask some questions? I know we've spoken before about the human side of AR, if that's the right kind of term, but can you talk a little bit about your experiences of the workers accepting or maybe not accepting AR as a tool to help them in the workplace? Perhaps throw a bit of experience and insight into that.
Yes, I'll say. So one of the challenges is the targeting or determining where to overlay the digital information on top of the physical environment. And I will say, if you don't have a very user-friendly, easy way to target, the users are not going to be interested in using your tool. So you have to really make an effort to make that friendly and easy for them to use. Otherwise, they think it's too complicated and they'll just put it aside and walk away. Because there's a trust issue there as well. Whereas they know and trust what they've always done. So if you're providing them with something that's complicated for them or they don't necessarily understand, there's not going to be that level of trust for them to embrace that change.
Okay, thank you. So I think some key words around friendly or a appropriate UX and trust, working with them through the process. I think some really interesting insights and something again to consider when looking to deploy AR. Okay, which takes us on to the next question and probably answer some of it, but from your experience, how should a company get started with AR? And the flip side of that is, what are the pitfalls or issues that they should look to avoid?
Sure. So I recommend starting by identifying an area of value for your company. And you can really do this by looking at different use cases that associate augmented reality with solving some pain points. So look at your processes, try to figure out where your pain points are. And then understand the challenges associated with those pain points and the user needs. So there may be technology challenges that you need to overcome, such as targeting or lighting, and that kind of goes back to the spider diagram that Mike shared. Maybe in some situations a heads-up display might not be applicable. Maybe they need to use a tablet, and maybe, as Mike said, they don't want to hold the tablet all the time, so they put it on something like a swing arm so they can put it in their field of view and then move it out of the way very quickly. And then think about and consider your digital data. Do you have data that's readily accessible or not? With our forward class carriers, we do have a 3D product model that we can that we draw from. So providing those digital overlays in the ship is fairly easy for us. But on the flip side, with the Nimitz class carriers, that was all designed on paper, so we don't have that three-dimensional product model to draw from. Now, we are undergoing an effort and we have done a lot of laser scanning, but that takes an additional amount of processing there. So then, once you've kind of narrowed that down, I recommend starting small with a pilot or even a proof of concept that targets that particular use case. And when you're doing that, make sure that the process owner and the end users are accepting of trying something new. They can be your biggest advocate, and you also need their buy-in. If you don't have their buy-in, they're not going to be accepting. So I recommend having or trying to get a process owner and end users who are embracive of change. So then after you run your pilot, use those results to prove the value. So that pilot will give you the data that you can use to kind of extrapolate from. But I also recommend to be careful with the data, because if you see a particular time savings reduction of 75% for that particular pilot, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see that in every case. So you have to understand why you saw that savings, understand how it was applicable to other processes, and part of that understanding is really truly maybe mapping out and understanding where the savings came from that process. And then also I recommend involving the stakeholders, such as IT, security if they're applicable, and most importantly the end user in your pilot. We do iterative projects, so we're constantly putting the application in the hand of the users to get their feedback. And then I would also say, as far as, maybe not as far as the pitfalls, but well, I will say with the pitfalls, if you don't involve your end user, what I've experienced and what our team has experienced is that they don't necessarily embrace it when we hand it over to them at the end of the day. And then I also wanted to touch on involving the mobility and the cybersecurity teams. So our focus very recently has been on deploying. So we've relied very heavily on our IT mobility and our IT cybersecurity teams to very easily deploy, an application once we have created it to the end users very, very seamlessly. So make sure you're working hand in hand with them, and I also recommend involving them early on in your projects.
Okay, Beth, any more?
No, that's all I had on that, unless you had some other specific questions.
Well, I also, the little insight, I know we've spoken about this before, that as a department you've actually moved now into kind of the core, if you like, IT or core business
Yes.
part, which I think is a really interesting move. Can you talk a little bit about that and the benefits of that?
Yeah, so several months ago, previously we were in engineering, and about 3 months ago we moved over to IT because our IT, they want to be really on the forefront of researching and embracing technologies for the business rather than being reactionary. So they're really undergoing a transformation of themselves so that they can be more on the forefront and exploratory in emerging technologies rather than reactionary. So they brought us over to kind of help change their culture.
Yeah, which I think is really interesting. piece of business kind of operation. So thank you for that insight. And it's something, as we all want to move out of these proof of concepts and prototypes and checking out the value, the organizations need to understand and adapt and have the AR team in the appropriate place within the organization. So it's really exciting to hear that you're actually moving into or have moved into that IT team.
Yes, and it's very easy for people to say no, and then it's more difficult to not say no, but figure out how to make it happen.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you, Beth. Okay, we have kind of a few minutes to do some Q&As here. So William has asked a question which I'll open to or ask to both of you, so please feel free to answer it. Could you give examples when virtual reality VR is preferred over AR, and where is that cutoff? So now moving into the VR space a little bit. You perhaps have got a view on that?
I can certainly weigh in. What we have found is VR is valuable when you want to transcend time or distance or scale. So, for example, it's pretty hard to have an AR experience relative to something, nanomachinery or the space station. You simply can't get there. So VR can be a better option there. AR, the most value provided by AR is when you are actually taking advantage of the physical space where you are in. So there is something, or there is some compartment, as Beth described, or some location that you want to see digital data about or relative to. That's where AR really shines. There are plenty of examples where people will, put a digital visualization of a let's say a product, a sales and marketing demo that I talked about. Is that really valuable in AR versus VR? You could have a debate. I think if it's important to understand that product at scale relative to me as the consumer or user of that product, I think that's where AR really shines. But I would just say, you really are augmenting reality, and therefore use AR when the physical space or objects around you are meaningful and important.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that 100%. We actually had a situation a while back where we had somebody come to us asking for my team to create an augmented reality experience to train on a piece of equipment. And when I asked the question, where's the equipment? They said, well, we don't have it. We just want to have an augmented reality experience overlaid on their training manual. I said, no, that's not a good use case for augmented reality, because nobody's going to want to stand there and just essentially point their tablet at a training manual. It was definitely more conducive to virtual reality than augmented reality.
Okay, thank you both. I've got another question, I think, which would be useful for the audience. What are the best use cases to quickly demonstrate the value of AR? Perhaps, Mike, do you want to have a quick go at that and provide some thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the best use cases are the ones that are valuable and meaningful to you and your business. So it's the answer is it depends. To the extent that you can do it quickly, I think that adds a level of value. Because let's face it, I mean, we're talking about communicating using a new language. So the ability to try something, maybe it's successful, but maybe it fails. But to the extent you can learn quickly and iterate and get the next version out and learn from your mistakes, I think that those are good use cases so that you can really uncover the value. But it's hard for me to say, service is the right one, or, product visualization is the right one. It really depends on what business challenges you have, what you and your colleagues and your management team care about, to figure out the best use case. But I would always err on the side of simpler being better and quicker being better than long and protracted projects.
Yeah, good point. Beth, any final insight on that?
No, I don't have any final insight on that. I think Mike summarized that very well.
Perfect. Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you for the people who have added some questions. I will be, we'll ask in Beth and Mike and myself will respond to those questions. So thank you for that. We've run out of time, so just want to thank Mike and Beth very much for joining us on this webinar. Their insight, these guys are champions of AR, so very lucky to have them speak to you today. I thank you all very much for attending. If you're interested in the area and any of the other organizations, please drop me a line at marketthearea.org. Always interested to hear in any of your use cases, case studies, success stories. We're here really to promote the ecosystem and benefit everybody. So once again, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Beth. Thank you all for attending, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Our pleasure, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Bye.